welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. And it's brought to you by our friends at Reprieve Recovery. That's Reprieve Recovery right up in Morgan, Utah. For more information, check them out, reprieverc.com. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley, and a little behind-the-scenes baseball, if you will.
Yeah.
We record this podcast on Thursdays.
True.
And today happens to be
Thursday.
Halloween.
It's also that. Yep.
And so I had something really cool happen to me today. And at first I didn't know how to feel about it, but I'm honored, and it was probably one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me. Now, let me set the scene for you.
Okay, I'm excited.
So for a lot of you guys who don't know, and maybe some of you do, my full-time job is, one of my full-time jobs is...
You have a few.
I'm a TV reporter for KSL TV. Mm-hmm. And my job...
Early morning shift.
From 4:30 until 7. And so my job is to go out into the community and highlight cool things that are going on, fun events, awareness, and just bring a lighthearted side to the news.
Yeah.
Because I think we can all agree that the news is pretty heavy these days.
It is. And your spots are fun.
Yeah. And so I get to go out there and just showcase unique stuff. And so today being Halloween, I was up at this cool place up in Farmington. It's called Scary Potter, Utah. And this young lady, Avery, who's about 20, 5 years ago during COVID, when she wasn't able to go to school, started constructing this world of Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. And she's got these massive, things that, I mean, she's got a buckbeak, which is a character in Harry Potter. She's got a dragon. She's got a basilisk. It's a big
snake.
Yep, that's what it is.
Yep.
And she's got all this cool stuff. And so while I'm up there,
now tell me, so you drive up to the house, do you have to go in, or can you see it from the outside?
It's all from the outside. And then inside their garage, you go to, what's Diagon Alley.
Oh, is that where they drink butterbeer?
Yep, and you can get your wand, and you can get your animal, and all kinds of cool stuff.
They have wands?
Yeah, and this place is amazing.
Wow. And
so I'm in there, and I'm showcasing this wonderful creation that this young lady has done with her family, and they do a big presentation the week before Halloween and Halloween night.
People bring their kids and stuff?
Yeah, oh yeah. And they do a magic trick, and smoke pops out, and then they get candy. I mean, this is legit. And so I'm sitting there in between shots, and the producer comes on and goes, "Hey, at the end of the show, will you please stick around? We want to wish everybody Halloween." Normally, I don't stick around because when I'm done with my last shot, I'm gone.
Right.
But I go, "Yeah, cool. I'll stick around." And so I'm sticking around, and they go, "Hey, we want you to look at the monitor." And so inside the truck, there's a monitor. Uh-huh. So you can react to the anchor's costumes. And I was like, cool. Yeah, no problem. And so I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden the TV comes on, and I look over, and it's crazy because I'm looking at the screen.
And these are the anchors back at the studio?
Yeah, and what they've dressed up as Halloween.
Okay.
And I'm seeing 5 of me.
Shut up.
Yeah. The whole morning team on KSL today dressed as me.
That's awesome.
In different stages for Halloween.
Got the mustache, the golf hats,
the golf shirt,
the hair flow,
my Letterman's jacket.
Oh, that's my
Letterman's jacket.
How did they get a hold of that?
So they got it from my girlfriend. So I called my girlfriend, and I was like, "Hey, how did you guys get all my stuff?" And they had my shoes. They had
those look like your hats.
They are my hats.
Yeah,
and they're my hats, my shirts, my Letterman's jacket, and my shoes.
That's amazing.
And they all dressed as me, and they come back to me.
I love it.
And I'm crying.
Really?
I'm crying laughter, and I'm crying tears of joy.
Yeah.
And it was crazy because, and I don't want to get emotional, but here is the people that I admire, that I'm so lucky to work with every day. And they're dressed up as me. And 6 years ago, I didn't want to be me. Mm-hmm. You know, and so I mean, it's just another testament to the power of recovery and what you can get back. Because I mean, that was what was going through my head. I was like, 6 years ago, I would have done anything in this world not to be me. I hated who I was. I didn't want to be me. And here, 6 years later, my coworkers are dressed as me, not as a joke, but because I make them laugh and I make them feel good.
You only do that if you love somebody.
And I was honored, and I was like, "How cool is this? What a full circle story." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You come back and it's like, this is the TV station that ran my mugshot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was like, this is what this guy has done.
Yeah.
And they weren't wrong, and they were right to do it.
It made big news. You made big news.
But
again.
now 6 years later, the same anchors are now dressed as me and celebrating me.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
That's amazing.
How lucky, how blessed am I that I get to have this life? And the only thing I have to do is stay sober.
Yeah. Well, sobriety brought that to you, right?
It brought me clarity. It brought me what's important. And it showed me that I can do hard things and that who I am is good. And I'm okay. And you know, and I'm worthy of happiness.
Yeah.
And I deserve the good things that happen to me.
Yeah.
And I'm very blessed and very fortunate and very lucky to have such wonderful friends and have good things happen to me. I know that. I know that. But I also know that I put in the work.
You have to put in the work, right? Wherever you're at in life, whatever you're doing, if you want good things, you have to put in the work. And then expect and hope for support from others, you know?
Somebody, I don't know, I'm going to butcher this. Well, somebody told me luck really is being prepared when good things present itself. Mm-hmm. And that's the definition of luck.
My high school football coach used to say, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to do the work, and you have to be prepared for when that door opens or that fastball comes your way, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're doing to be able to do it, but you've got to do the work.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to say today, I know this is coming out on Election Day, which is own Halloween, and it's...
Yeah, I prefer this Halloween.
Yeah, you know, and so whatever it is, but what a blessed life that I have because of recovery. And I'm so thankful for everyone who allows me to do this, who has given me a second, third, and fourth shot, and is now allowing me to give back and live such an amazing life. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's pretty good to be Casey Scott. But you're right. It's because you've put in the work. Because there was a time when
I was phoning it in.
It wasn't good to be Casey Scott.
No, it was downright horrible.
No, I love it. And I love celebrating the success stories of our guests on the show. But I also love celebrating your success in recovery because you do something that I think a lot of people would struggle doing, and you've put it all out there. Ever since I've known you, you've always been willing to kind of share your personal self with everybody and the ups and the downs. And I love that we're in a major upswing.
That was the original idea for the podcast, was to let everybody go along this ride with me. And
we didn't think it would last more than a few episodes because that was the story, right?
And we didn't know how it was going to turn out.
Right.
I mean, I very well could have relapsed. I very well could have ran.
Sure.
I could have hid. I could have died. I mean, there's all these things.
People could have chosen not to take a chance on you and bring you back into the media work that you've always done.
But that was my idea. I was like, I want to take people on this journey with me as I tackle sobriety and I look to recovery. I want people to know what it's like. I want them to be able to go along this journey with me. So that's why at the beginning of every podcast, we either talk about something that's new in the recovery world or what's going on in my life. Because here I am 6.5 years into sobriety. I'm still learning stuff and I'm still figuring it out. And so my job as a podcast host is to inform you what's going on in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, like my world, like I was talking to my ex-wife on the way in. I was like, are you okay? And she was like, what are you talking about? I said, well, your oldest daughter's moving out this weekend, and this is the last year your youngest son is going to be able to trick or treat. And I'm lucky to be here for both of those moments. So whatever happens, I'm excited just to be in the conversation because 6 years ago, I wasn't going to be in the conversation.
Well, you took yourself out of it pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I self-sabotaged myself, and I let things get to me and take me down that I knew better.
Well, in all fairness, you can't self-sabotage someone else, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, sometimes my mouth gets ahead of my brain.
I love you, man.
Yeah, I love you
I
too.
really do. Hey, I want you to, that picture, I want you to post that. Let's have Josh post that.
Yeah, I'll send it to him.
Because I want Ashley to see that. She'll love it.
It's like one guy had a ab shirt on.
I know.
That's crazy. Hey, we've got a wonderful guest for you today who it just happens to be Halloween is your mother's birthday. What's your mom's name?
Stephanie.
Let's wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Mom.
What does your mom mean to you?
She means the world to me. Growing up, I was always a knucklehead, getting into trouble, getting suspended, and even through my adult life with my addiction, she taught me what unconditional love looks like and what it is.
I love that. We're going to hear Daniel's story next. You're listening to Project Recovery. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Casey Scott. That is Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist. Our guest today is Daniel Quinones, and he's a machinist. Is that correct?
That's right.
And we're going to find out more about that in just a second. But where does the story of Daniel Quinones begin?
Well, I was born here in Utah, born and raised, Ogden, far west area.
You know, we call it the biggity O. Yeah, they do. Well, we did when I was a kid.
Or O-Town.
Or O-Town.
Yeah.
Did you ever drag the Vard in Ogden?
Yeah, when I was younger.
Yeah.
I'm from Morgan, and I've even dragged the Vard.
That's what we used to do for fun.
Yeah.
Before people could swipe right or get on Instagram, you had to get out and do something.
Yeah. If you wanted to find a cute girl, you had to go.
Get you the Vard.
You had to earn
the Vard.
it.
Yep. So you grew up. How many siblings you got?
I'm the oldest of 4. No,
Okay.
5.
5.
Including me, yeah. I'm the
Okay.
oldest. All boys.
All boys.
Yeah.
And
I have one sister also.
Ooh.
Wow.
We're
Yeah.
going to pause and do an extra happy birthday to your mom then.
yeah. That many boys. Congratulations. So what was it like your upbringing?
It was pretty normal, honestly.
I got to stop you there because I think a lot of people say it was pretty normal. But what we've talked about and what we've learned on the podcast, it's not always normal. What was normal to you?
Well, normal to me was, so my parents were divorced at a young age, so we lived with my mom primarily. And me and my brothers just grew up watching sports, playing sports, watching wrestling each other.
Dad would come on the weekends?
Yeah, we'd go to my dad's on the weekends or go up to my grandma's with him in Idaho. Went up to Idaho Falls quite a bit.
What was the culture of partying with your family? Was there a lot of alcohol around, or?
Yeah, during barbecues on both sides of the family, we'd get together, play cards, birthday parties, and it was pretty normal. But I wouldn't say that was like a place where my addiction started.
Where do you remember the first time you tried drugs or alcohol?
First time I tried alcohol, I think I was maybe 10 or 11. My grandpa had mini bottles. He didn't think that I would try it, and I tried it. And I remember the feeling to this day at that young age.
Did you like it?
From what I remember, no. No, I didn't. I didn't like it. And even to this day, like, it's not something.
Alcohol was never really your
Never.
jam.
In high school. More in high school it was.
And so what was your high school career like? Did you have a good time in high school?
I had a great time in high school, but it wasn't for the things of going to school and playing sports. That's kind of where I would say my addiction started, and it started with alcohol, partying on the weekends. That was more important than anything else.
I think a lot of people in high school, so we don't have to, but I think in terms of development all the time, like what's a person's stage of development? Casey and I are old guys. We're in that stage of development. But when you're in high school, yeah, there's the learning part, but it's also that finding your identity, finding who you are. So there's a lot of social, a lot of trying out different activities and trying out lots of different activities.
And when you think back on it, some people knew right from the get-go that they were going to be athletes. And so from elementary school all the way to high school, it was football, it was basketball, it was tennis, whatever it was. That somewhat became their identity.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But
And for somebody who was not good at sports, maybe not good at academia, and, there was looking for a place to find home or looking for a group or looking for a community.
I had a conversation with a teenage girl today in therapy, and she is all in on art and all different kinds of art. That's always been her thing. We were talking about her art portfolio today. So you're right. There are some kids, where there's that. Most of us, though, are still kind of looking through adolescence, like, and we want to try things out, different groups of people. You might want to see if you can be a musician. You want to see if you can be an athlete. And I think, therefore, the academics of getting to school and doing all that can get lost for a lot of kids, like the what we think of as the reason for high school. But part of that's normal development. You know, like, we need to figure out who we are at that age. And the big problem with the midlife crisis, that's usually a person who never really kind of figured that out. So do you feel like your partying, your extracurricular activities in high school were about kind of finding yourself, or was it something else?
So as a sophomore, I was on the football team during the summer, and my grades carried over from junior high. So I got cut from the team. And I can look back on it, and at that point, I kind of just threw my hands up in the air, and that's when, like, the partying got more and more intense every weekend.
Was that hard for you? Were you excited about being on the football team?
Yeah, I was, and like, I wasn't All-American or anything, but it was playing sports up to that point was something I really enjoyed and enjoyed watching. Like, being an athlete was the coolest thing to me. Well,
it's part of that. We call it affiliation. Teenagers, everybody has some need for affiliation, but definitely when you're a teenager. And I know Casey and I both played high school football, and I don't really remember the outcomes of most games, but what I remember is being on the team with my friends and going to the games. So that probably was hard to be excited about that and then have it taken away.
Yeah, it was hard. And instead of it like motivating me, I kind of just took the loss, and without really no plan what to do next, just went down a path that I thought was normal, you know, for kids in high school, like you see it on TV.
And I think there is some normalcy to people experimenting with partying. I mean, I wish that it was different, but it's not. I mean,
teenagers want to try things. I had a professor in graduate school. He used to say teenagers try on their personalities like jackets. You know, it's like 1 week you're this, 1 week you're that. And partying is one. And I don't know if you felt like this, but the kids that party, like parking lot crew kind of kids, they're super accepting, right?
Yeah.
And when you find yourself without any other place to go, as long as you're willing to do what they're doing and not criticize them, you're in the club, right?
Yeah.
So the party jacket fit.
It fit.
And you liked it.
Yeah, and like, I enjoyed it. But not knowing the consequences that were coming and coming quickly, even after those consequences, it's like I was programmed already. Something in my mind was like, I didn't learn my lesson. And it just kept progressing and progressing.
What were some of those consequences for you in high school?
Alcohol tickets, getting busted at parties, underage drinking, or driving home, you know, on a Saturday night and getting pulled over, and we all get alcohol tickets. I probably had about 4 alcohol tickets in high school.
Now, I'm an addict, so I can speak on my own experience. But for other people, the normal people out there, that's usually enough to scare them away.
Yeah.
That's usually enough to be like, hey, this is not something that I want to do.
Right.
But for us, it's like, well, you got to be smarter next time.
Like the first time that my mom had to come get me in the middle of the night, you would think, okay, I learned my lesson. But that was just the beginning of the stress that I would put her through.
So you said alcohol wasn't really your jam. When did you first try drugs?
So moving throughout high school with no plan, no really desire to look past it, you know, I went from my normal high school to alternative high school, and that's kind of where all the degenerates were at. And kind of like you were saying earlier, like, that was more of an accepting group than at a regular high school, because we're all there for pretty much the same reason, not taking school seriously.
Misfits.
Yeah, misfits. We're degenerates.
Now, I think most people know what an alternative high school is, but if you don't, it's usually one high school in one school district where everybody who has been labeled a problem, been suspended,
asked
kicked
to leave,
out,
failing out at the regular school.
They go there and try to help them.
They kind of fast track, try to get you through to your degree.
And at this one, like the girls at the time that had kids, like their kids were allowed to go. So like during lunch, there's kids running around. Like it was like kind of like its own little party every day. And that's kind of when the partying progressed even more. And at 18 was the first time I tried heroin. And that's when things really went downhill pretty quickly.
Now, I want to ask you this, and you can answer freely however you choose. From alcohol, did you try any other drugs before heroin, or did you go straight to heroin?
Throughout high school, I'd smoke weed, but I wasn't like a big, pothead or whatever. It was mainly just on the weekends, partying, getting drunk.
If somebody had it.
Yeah. Coke every now and then. But heroin was like, again, I don't know why I tried it. I think we were just bored one day.
Because it seems like a pretty big leap.
Yeah.
Well, just even the name heroin, sounds, or at least to a lot of us, it sounds scary.
Yeah, it does sound scary, but at that time in the state, this was like 2009, 2008, heroin just like came out of nowhere and took over everywhere across the state.
Is that because they put a lockdown or tried to regulate the opioids a little bit?
I think that's when opioids was like at its peak, and then heroin came around and it was a lot cheaper and pretty easier to get, honestly.
And one thing that maybe the casual, listener to this show may or may not understand is illegal drugs are kind of on a supply and demand basis. And so things come in and out of fashion based on the supply.
Yeah.
And so you're right, when the opioid crisis in the United States really hit its peak and people couldn't afford that anymore, I mean, entrepreneurial drug dealers started flooding the market with cheap and probably cheap quality heroin. And so kids, teenagers, an 18-year-old who maybe even a few years earlier would have had a hard time getting their hands on that, all of a sudden in the early 2000s, it was everywhere and it was cheap, right?
Yeah, it was everywhere and it was cheap. And we'd travel from like Ogden down here to Salt Lake every day just to
easy to get.
Easier to get, cheaper to get. And with that drug, it gets a hold of you physically, just like any opiate. So after a few days of using it, your body is so dependent on it that you just keep going just to not feel that sick.
And if you're smoking, is that how you started smoking?
I started with snorting it. Then started smoking it.
And so that's also a delivery system. Like a pill has to be digested, and that takes longer. And so people don't understand the physiology of it. Like if you snort something, if you smoke it, if you inject it, that is like an immediate effect of whatever drug you're taking versus, somebody who's digesting.
And I jumped to inject and using it like through IV pretty quickly.
So walk me through the first time you tried heroin and your thoughts after your first time.
Well, we went and got it and snorted it, and immediately, I want to explain it, but I don't want to like glorify.
But I think I'm not saying glorify, but I think it helps people at home understand the instant attraction to it.
Instantly you feel like the euphoria is the best way to put it, that it gives you physically throughout your body, and from that moment, that's what you're chasing every time.
Anybody who's ever had a surgery or something and they've taken, an opioid painkiller, like I remember I ruptured my Achilles tendon, and it was really painful, and they sent me home before I could get my surgery with a few pills. And I just remember laying in bed feeling like I was floating on a cloud of whipped cream, man. I was just like, wow.
And that's what it does to you.
Yeah, instantly.
And the lie of drugs is it works until it doesn't work. But you said after a couple of times you were addicted.
Yeah, physically and mentally, but the physical sickness that you get from coming off of opiates is like the flu times 10.
We've had people be in here on the podcast and say they would pray for death because they didn't want to get dope sick.
Yeah.
They'd much rather die than get dope sick.
Yeah, it's the worst feeling, and if you haven't gone through it, it's kind of hard to put it into words what you feel.
So once you start down the heroin road, what does your life look like?
Like I said, straight out of high school, not working. I was living at my dad's at this time, And every day was just another hunt to get $20 to feed my habit. Or if I couldn't, I'd be sick for 2 days. And you would think at that point, okay, just go through it a couple more days and you'd be off of it. But I was so young and so deep into this, like the addiction part already, that all that mattered was just getting better.
And I don't think at that young age, I don't think at any age you're prepared for the fight that's ahead of you.
No.
Well, and not to get too nerdy about it, but when we say we're not prepared, we usually think, oh, like because of life experience and you're kind of immature. All of that's true. But even worse, your brain isn't developed fully. The executive function, the last part of our brains that develops, doesn't really develop until we're 25. That's the part you need to think your way through problems. And you're right. You're completely unprepared for the monster that addiction is when you're 18.
Yeah.
Or you're fresh out of high school. You start and end every day as a hunt for $20 to feed your habit.
Yeah.
At some point, it's got to become more than a $20 habit.
It's whatever you can get. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't selling it. I was just a straight user, like to the fullest. That's all that mattered. And I would do anything, steal from anybody, screw over anybody that I could just to feed my habit, just to feed my addiction.
And that starts to wreak havoc on your personal life, your friendship, your family.
My family has taken the brunt of my addiction, from my mom to my dad to my grandmother. Would be like, they were the main ones that I would take advantage of, that unconditional love that I was talking about earlier. That was the addict in me, and that's what it turned me into, to manipulate and steal and do whatever it took to feed.
At any of this point in the early infancy, did your family or friends go, hey, Daniel, I think we might have a problem?
Oh, right away. Like I said, I was living with my dad. My stepmom came into my room one night and walked right in as soon as I was about to shoot up. And she seen the blood coming out of my arm. And my father kicked me out. And then I would say like 2 or 3 days later, my mom found out what happened. They came to get me, took me to detox, and put me in rehab like right away.
What was your thoughts? Were you like, yeah, no, I'm cool?
I wanted to stop, but along with the addiction, like the substance part, there's another addiction forms, and that's running around the streets,
running and gunning,
meeting people just like you. I guess, like misery loves company. And the whole process to get the drug became part of the addiction as much as the drug did itself.
It was a thrill, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're running, gunning. It's exciting. You never know what's going to happen.
There's no responsibility outside of just feeding your habit and getting that euphoria feeling that,
So you go to detox and they take you straight to rehab. How long does that last?
I was in an outpatient rehab, and I think I lasted about a month or two. But again, just didn't know, probably wasn't ready for the information that I was being provided, and just relapsed. And at the time, I was on juvenile probation still for my juvenile history, and was on the run from there, so I had a warrant from juvenile. Broke into my dad's house, stole some stuff, and then got in trouble for that. So went from juvenile probation straight to AP&P in a matter of, this was like probably within the first year of me being on heroin.
That escalated quick.
Really quickly.
And so for the next, how many years are you out there just trying to?
So I got on AP&P. I think that charge was in 2009. Was in and out for dirties and going on the run for my probation. Came out to Salt Lake. We were on our way back to Ogden. Got pulled over, and I had like my needle and my spoon on me. And at the time, any measurable amount in the state is considered possession. So they tested my spoon and the residue and got charged with possession of a controlled substance.
Now, is that a felony?
Yeah. And at this time, I was already on felony probation. So that was felony on felony. And that's what sent me to prison in 2011.
So you went to prison.
Yeah.
How long are you in prison for?
The first time was 18 months. But the thing, like here in the state, back then, they would send you to prison, but then send you to a county jail.
Oh.
So they sent me to Draper, did like 2 months in Draper, and then they sent me to Beaver to do my time, Beaver County.
And so during that time,
Oh, hold on.
oof.
You're 21 at this time, right?
Yeah, I turned 21 in Weber County Jail.
See, that's my math skills because
Yeah.
I knew he was born the year I graduated
There
from
you
high
go.
school.
I got you.
Yeah. How did that feel to go to prison? Well, you say you went to Draper. That's where the old prison was.
Right.
So you went to the actual prison, Utah State Prison, before they sent you down to a county. So that sounds scary to me. Like at 21, you're not, you're an adult, but you're a kid still. Like, what
Yeah.
was that like for you, being told you're going to prison?
Up to that point, I was in and out of jail. Like my cycle was mess up during the fall and winter time, go on the run, get caught, be locked up all summer. So that was like my cycle for a good 2.5 years, however many in between that is. So when I got sentenced to prison, I was kind of already used to being incarcerated. I was kind of used to what,
Okay.
but
you had some experience, I
yeah,
guess.
and the area that I was in at the time had people in there that were familiar with prison, so they kind of like smartened me up on what to expect and whatnot. But prior to that, I already kind of had a feeling that I was just going to go into the R&O area in the prison and then get...
I don't know what R&O is.
It's just like you come in, they assess you, and pretty much figure out where they're going to put you. Decide if like you're high risk, if just where they're going to...
There's observation going on.
Yeah,
right
observation,
there.
pretty much.
So you go there for 2 months. They send you down to Beaver County, which is a small town in the middle of Utah.
Yeah.
And you spend another 16 months there?
Yeah, it was about 16 months. Did the program. There's a good program there. I think it's called the BRT, Beaver Residential Treatment.
Uh-huh.
And it's all ran by inmates. The one counselor that comes in, he was like the creator of it, and we'd all meet with him like once a week. But for the most part, and just like most of the other programs in the correction field or whatever, it's all ran by inmates. And so like you have I can't remember like the name, like your coordinator, and you set up groups throughout the whole day. You do it right there in the section where you live,
And you found it very productive.
It was productive. It's a good switch up because everyone is more positive, and you're in there with people just like you dealing with
Addicts.
the same addicts. Yeah.
So we've heard people say that it's easy to get drugs
That's what I was just going to
in
ask.
prison.
Yeah.
Was this a drug-free experience for you?
It was. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was drug free.
And so you graduate there after 18 months. Mm-hmm. And where do you go from there?
Paroled home in July of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my cycle started. Did good for like the first week. Started smoking spice because at the time the spice was huge out here too.
That was in fashion at that time.
Yeah,
right? Yep.
and like that made you physically sick too if you stopped.
Let me ask you this: why spice? Why do anything at this point? Because it seems like you're doing good.
Again, I just don't think I was ready. Like I said, I was ready when I was locked up. Like I had all these plans to do different. But once you come out, and
That's when the real work starts.
that's when it starts, and you kind of forget. Like you're so excited of being home, being out, being free, that you forget what you told yourself and what you went through when you're locked up pretty
Now,
quickly.
With spice specifically, this is what I remember people saying who had harder drug problems. They're like, "Oh, it's just spice."
Yeah.
And so I just need a little something. It's, like somebody who's like, "Oh, I just need a little caffeine for the day."
Yeah.
It was easy to justify. Was that kind of why you went to spice instead of right back to your DOC?
No, it wasn't. They couldn't test for it.
Oh, and then there's that.
Like
yeah. Yep.
that was the main reason. Like, oh, okay, like I still want to try and get away with what I can get away with, and spice was, at every gas station in the state, so it was easy to get. And I probably justified or talked myself into thinking like, oh, it's not a problem.
They sell it at gas stations.
They sell it at gas stations.
So where from Spice, where does it go to?
Back to heroin.
Pretty quick?
Yeah, within the first 6 months, back to heroin. Because Spice would leave you physically sick too once you stop smoking it. To the point where I'd be eating a meal and have to stop eating my meal because I'd get sick, smoke some more Spice just to finish my meal. Like,
really?
It was bad stuff.
And so you're now back on heroin. How's the family feel at this point? They know?
Pretty quickly, yeah. It's not something that anyone could hide, especially myself. Like, my mom knows every time that I'm messing up pretty quickly.
And so you're back out running and gunning? Did they kick you out?
I didn't go that far. I ended up telling my PO about it. And at the time, there was a program called Drug Board for parolees. It was kind of like your last shot. And just like drug court, but you answer, instead of a judge, you see a representative from the Board of Pardons every week. Did that, was doing really well in it. And like I was talking about earlier, out running around was like part of the addiction for me. And I started to just like fantasize, like, man, kind of miss being out there. And just one day, it was on a Sunday, I left my buddy's house and decided to go pick up some meth. And went on a meth run until they sent me back.
Back to jail?
Back to prison, yeah, on violations.
So why meth this time?
I honestly don't know. I think it was just a switch up from the heroin, but also I used to hear like stories in jail about it. And for whatever reason, my addict mind like kept that in the back of my mind of like more out of curiosity.
Now, it sounded fun or interesting.
Yeah, it sounded fun. It sounded different than what I was used to with the heroin.
Do you snort, smoke, or inject meth?
I started smoking it, but I'm an IV user, so I started injecting it pretty quickly.
And you find yourself in trouble with the law once again, this time with meth, and they send you back to prison. How long are you going this time?
I went back for 4 months, got out, back on drug board, and the same cycle. It was the same cycle for me every time. Would do good for a few months, and not knowing how to deal with my cravings or that almost like fantasy thinking of what, running around and everything. Not knowing how to deal with that was probably my biggest.
One of the things when I was, an active user with alcohol was that I was different. I was smarter than everybody else. And so a lot of times that gave me the courage or the fight to keep going because I've got it figured out this time. I've figured out what I can't do.
Don't you think, and you can answer this too, Daniel, don't you think part of it is, like, because you said the phrase, to see what I could get away with?
Yeah.
And so you do feel superior and smarter, but there's also it's like a chess match, right? It's like, can I pull one over on whoever? And I think that's part of the fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it would just like mess me up even more because then the stress of, I need to try and pass this UA. I have 3 days until I see my PO. So if I stop tonight, and I would never make it through the 3 days, I would just continue to push the envelope, even go in there dirty, praying that they wouldn't drug test me. Sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. But on that program, I was on colors. So once I started using, I already knew what time it was, and I would go right on the run. Like, I wouldn't even try to make it right with my PO. I would just go straight on the run.
I'm trying to remember if my color was orange or brown.
I was going to say, just for the listener, colors are when what?
So every day you're supposed to call this number and they tell you your color. I think mine was orange or brown.
I think yours was brown.
Brown. And I would call and they go, today we are testing light blue, brown, and orange. And if they say those, then you have to drive into, which I had to get an Uber because I didn't have a driver's license, to go in there and give them a urine sample.
Yeah.
And then they would test it for drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
So I think we're missing a little thread here, though. I just want to investigate with you.
Yeah.
Because you've said several times, like, you were thinking about it, like, oh, I kind of miss that being out there and running and being on the street sort of, idea. Like, why do you think that was part of it for you? Because that's an interesting thing you keep coming back to. What is it about you that made that enticing?
It was no responsibility. It was chilling, with other people just like me, and we were all doing the same thing. So, like, it almost felt not at home, but like a peaceful feeling. In the midst of all that chaos, doing all of that brought some like false peace or pride to myself.
So that chilling with other people. So the word I'd throw on that is affiliation, right?
Yeah.
And that almost goes back to getting kicked off the football team.
Yeah.
You're still a young person. You're still trying to figure out who you are. And you're still, I think, trying to fit somewhere, feel connected, a connection and affiliation. You think that? I think that was a big drive for you.
Yeah, it was. And just something about running around, meeting new people, like
lack of responsibility.
Responsibility, and
but meeting new people. It keeps coming back to people for you, huh?
Yeah, meeting new people.
But you did have responsibility because during some of this time, you managed to have some kids, right?
So, yeah, in 2015, it was like 2014, I went back. The last time I went back to prison, they terminated me. I get out in 2015, meet my kids' mom. She had a 4-month-old son, and at the time, the relationship with his biological dad, just it was what it was at the time. So I have helped raise him, and at that point, when I got out and they came into my life, his name's Dominic. He really taught me very quickly what life should be about. So I hadn't used heroin or meth or nothing, but I was on Subutex, and that presented a whole new list of problems.
For those who don't know, Subutex is what?
It's a opioid blocker, or like they give it to you when you're coming off of opiates. It's meant for short-term use, but I was on it for years, like straight, and had it under control. So I think, like my life was in control. I was being responsible. I was, raising a family at the time, and that's how I justified it. Even though I was snorting them every day, I was still justifying it because my life wasn't in chaos. My self-destruction, it was there, but it was moving at a slower rate than it was if I was still sticking a needle in my arm. And then in 2018, my first biological son, Legend, was born. And then in 2019, my youngest, Princeton, he was born.
And so during those times, when was the longest time you've had sobriety under your belt?
Well, even during that time, I wasn't sober. Like, I was still taking Subutex. It's still mind altering, and eventually was taking Xanax on top of that. I was getting prescriptions for them, so that was my justification of still using it outside of the physical sickness that the Subutex was putting on my body.
Because let's be honest, you were abusing that medication.
Yeah, I was abusing it.
It had a purpose in your life, or it's supposed to have a purpose for somebody to wean them off, get them through a short period of time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, people find ways to stay on it for years.
Yeah.
And like you said, you were crushing it up and snorting it, so it's obviously abusing it.
Yeah.
And then something like Xanax, which is prescribed usually for anxiety for people, is also highly abusable. People abuse those quite a bit. Did you ever mix those with alcohol? Were you doing that?
I've never really been a big drinker.
Okay.
Like, I've drank before, but high school was like the peak of that for me.
Isn't it interesting? Like, we have one DOC here in Casey, definitely alcohol. For you, it sounds like alcohol, you could leave it or take it, whatever. It wasn't that big a deal, but these other things are. Our biology is fascinating.
Yeah.
What our body craves. And you definitely drank enough in high school to start, out to be an alcoholic.
Yeah.
If that was your DOC, but it wasn't. And that's just interesting to me.
So where does your rock bottom come to fruition?
So in 2021, I was trying to come off of the Subutex and the Xanax. Like, it was becoming a problem. Like, my nose was starting to deteriorate from the Subutex. And I tried to come off of them both cold turkey, and that was a recipe for disaster. I went to detox for 5 days, and it helped with the withdrawals from them. But coming off of the Xanax after taking 2 to 3 of them a day for 3 years, by the time I went back home from the detox facility, like, little did I know, the withdrawals were just starting. And I held on for about a week and a half going through it. And then one day, I told my girlfriend at the time, I'm just like, I can't take this anymore. We got to do something. Well, that something was meth. And I went on a good about 9-month run on meth, and just like everything else in my past, went from smoking it straight to shooting it. But this time it was harder to navigate and harder to accept, and maybe that's why I kept going, because now my kids were around it. And prior to that, like, I had custody of my 2 biological kids. From Legend was 18 months and Princeton was 2 weeks old when I got him. So, like, I did everything that I was trying to protect them from, I was bringing into their life. And I remember one day I was putting them all 3 to bed, and Legend and Dominic just was looking at me, and I could still see it to this day. Like, the look on their face was just like, dude, like, what are you doing? But even in that moment, like, I still kept going. I kept going, and it took them being taken away from me, staying with their mother, me having nowhere else to go, driving around in my car, going to my storage, to finally, even like in my past with the heroin, going to prison, I never had a moment like this where it was like, this is it.
This was your epiphany. This was your aha moment.
Yeah, and like the rehabs that I've been in before, the meetings that I'll go to, everyone's talked about, like, you have to have your rock bottom or that moment. And I used to think, like, going to prison, starting my life, restarting. I thought those were my moments. But looking back on it, the time where I had my kids and I was doing really well, even though I was on Subutex and Xanax, like, I was still doing really well for myself and raising my boys. But looking back, I can remember times where I'd be laying there at night, still that fantasy of, I wonder what it would be like just to, for a weekend or whatever. I would never act on it, but it took me being in a vulnerable state of coming off of the prescription meds mixed in with my addict mind already going, that pushed me finally to that edge of going back to meth.
So you have your aha moment, and you say you're rock bottom, and you get some clarity. And how do you fight it this time?
I just knew when I'm using, like, I turn into like a fiend. Like, that's what I am. That's who I am when I'm using. I'll do some, and then 5-10 minutes later, okay, let's go again. If I don't have it, then I'm fiending for it. So I knew if I could get past 1 day, then I could get to 2. But I knew if I could get to a week, that part of me that was fiending for it would slowly go away. And so that's what I pushed for. And to be 100% honest with you, when I was coming off of meth, like, I used medical marijuana to help me with all that. And it played its part in it. But I just knew going back to meth and continuing to poke myself with a needle, I knew how that was going to end, because prior to that, it would only end by me getting locked up. I would always go on the run, and the only way it would stop was by me going back to jail or going back to prison. And with the kids, my kids involved now, like I needed to get back to them. I needed to be who they were used to, and I needed to make sure that I can do whatever I can to where I don't pass this on to them. And like that's still like my goal to this day.
Now you've been sober for how long?
March 25th of 2022 was the last day I used.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And so you've done this with just kind of everything that you've learned over the past 20 years, with a lot of grit, a lot of determination, and kind of formulated your own plan.
Yeah, that's right. I wrote a book about it called The Beehive Fiend. And when I was getting clean off of meth this last time, I had the opportunities of rehab, left both times. So I knew that wasn't an option anymore. But also, I learned a lot through all the times that I was in rehab and kind of what stuck with me, what worked for me, and kind of just wrote up my own program as I went along. I went down to Weber Human Services, signed myself up for random UAs. You know, I wasn't on probation and wasn't on...
I didn't even know you could do that.
I was just going to say that is the first time in 6 years I've heard of anybody signing themselves up for random UAs.
So basically you go to these people and go, hey, I want you to call my color every once in a while and I'll come down and pee for you?
Well, I went down and signed up for classes. I was on Medicaid at the time, and I didn't know this, but if you're on Medicaid, then you can go and sign up at like Davis Behavioral, Weber Human Services, and get treatment.
So it's a way to keep yourself accountable.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just going to say. Like, I had to keep myself accountable. And at this time, like, my kids weren't in my life. And this was the first time since they were born where, like, their person wasn't there with them. You know, they're with their mom, and DCFS is involved at this time. So I knew, like, I had to take the initiative to get to where I needed to be for them. And that was the first thing I did. Signed up for some classes and random UAs just to add more accountability to get through like that first week, that second week to a month of, you know, keeping my mind busy.
And so how did the book come to be?
It was about a year after I, came off that, I always wanted to be like an entrepreneur. I just didn't know what. You know, I'm still figuring that out. But I follow this other entrepreneur, and he gives out like free game basically. And I bought his it's like 7 steps in creating an ebook. And he's basically saying like if you have an answer for like someone else's problem, like go down that route. So I'm thinking to myself, hey, man, what am I good at? Like, and I'm like, oh yeah. I'm good at messing up and becoming better at turning it around to where I don't mess up again. And just the experience that I went through with the relapse and the steps that I took after the fact to make, to live a better life, that was where the idea came from.
So before we got on the air today, you were saying how the book is sort of part autobiography, part program, and you said there are some pillars to your program. Can you share a couple of those? Like, what are your pillars that you've used?
So, like, pillar number 1 is peace over poison. I feel like for me, when I was in my addiction, the drug gave me the peace, but it was poison. Like, it's straight poison. There's only 2 ways that's going to go, like jail or death. So being honest with yourself that you're 100% done. Like I said, in the past, I always had that thing in the back of my mind that was sort of still fantasizing about that life. So taking that step and being honest with yourself and getting to the point where like you're at your rock bottom, you have to feel that. Mm-hmm. Like you have to feel that you're 100% completely done. And that's kind of where I start off in the book. And pillar number 2 is getting help to heal. And that's where it comes in of me signing myself up for random UAs, signing myself up for classes. there's a organization in Ogden called USARA. I went to USARA.
I love those guys.
Yeah, went to USARA, and because coming out of that relapse, I just wasn't ready to jump right into like the meetings, and so I met a guy named Riley there, and
We've had Riley on the show.
Really?
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
Yeah.
He was my peer support, and I would meet with him once a week, and kind of like me, similar story about his, of drug of choice or whatever. So like I connected with him, was able to talk to him about like the mental stuff that I was dealing with that methamphetamines brings onto you, and was just able to have that extra added support.
I find it fascinating that this is all stuff that you've gathered through different avenues throughout your drug career, and you put it all together in one book. And I've said it before, to me, I look at recovery as a buffet where I walk down and I grab the stuff that I think makes sense to me, that will fit on my plate, that I know I'll be able to eat. And so I do that. That's how I look at my recovery. Some people's recovery is a restaurant, and that restaurant is 12-step. Some people it's fit to recovery. Some people it's SOAR, whatever it is. Yeah. But there's a lot of people out there like you and myself that, that one size doesn't fit all. And so we've got stuff from all these different places that makes sense, that helps us in our recovery. And that's what I love about your book. That's what I love about your idea. And that's what I love about your story. And I can tell you're a wonderful father. And I can tell that those kids mean so much to you. And that this is one of the reasons you're doing it. But I've got to ask now, how is your life
now? My life's great. I'm in a new relationship, and she's probably the best thing that's happened to me and my kids. Like she sacrifices a lot for us, and she has 2 beautiful boys, so we have 5 boys total at times. Mom. Yeah, at times. And we got into that relationship fresh out of my relapse. And I know that's like a big no-no, but for me, she helped me get through a lot, and she helped me feel something that I haven't felt in a long time, and helped me believe in myself. Having someone else believe in you is, I feel, huge to recovery, and having someone see something in you that you can't even see in yourself can make a world of difference. And hope is sometimes all you need to get this party started. Where can people find your book? It's available pretty much everywhere. It seems that Barnes & Noble is the easiest. It's an ebook, so you'll have to download the app, and then you can download the book to your phone. We'll
put a link here underneath our podcast and then on our social media. Dr. Matt, what do you think about Daniel's story?
I think it's hard to undervalue the importance of a good mom. I'm going to bring it back to your mom again. It's Mom's birthday today, but I think she actually is a big part of why you're at where you're at today. I know that's nothing new to you, but Casey, what's the opposite of addiction?
Connection.
And so I think that you use the word unconditional love with your mom.
Yeah.
And when we're young and we're impressionable, that feeling of unconditional love and connection that a good parent can bring in our lives is just invaluable. And I sort of feel like throughout your life, that's sort of what you were trying to find. And that feeling that you had with your kids, it sounds like that was a big part of it. That love you had for them was like, I've got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And then one evolution past that is now you have this wonderful relationship. And that's, you said you felt something with her that you haven't felt in a long time.
Yeah.
And so I think that as a parent, we have to trust that if we've been able to create that unconditional love, that connection that only a parent and a child can have, that can sometimes carry a person through their life, ups and downs, their challenges, and something as horrific as an IV drug addiction, which you've had. And I want to I'm giving shout outs to your mom today. I don't even know her, but I think that a lot of where you're at today is because you were re-seeking that connection that you've always had with your mom. And so I love that because it's a story of love. It's a story of connection. Those are things that are hard to measure, but when you feel them, you know they're there.
Yeah. And I would also throw my grandma in on there too.
Great.
Those 2 women have been a huge part in my life and has helped shape me into who I am today. And
Our brain gets wired
yeah,
for that kind of connection when we're young.
yeah, like my best memories as a child are at home with my mom or up in Idaho with my grandparents. And so that the unconditional love is like the best way to describe it and what they've taught me.
The thing I like about your story, and I want to draw a little attention to it, is the opposite of addiction isn't abstinence, it's connection, it's community. And it seems like you, for the majority of your story, was looking for a community. Whether it's be the guys running and gunning on the street, the football team, whatever it may be, the inmates in prison, you know what I mean? You're looking for that. Now, there's good community and there's bad community, you know, and so we've got to be smart about it and we've got to be wise. But the value of a community, everybody wants to feel belonged.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to feel welcomed. Everybody wants to be a part of something. And you've got to figure out which way to point your shoes to make sure you're getting the kind of connection that you deserve and that's going to benefit you. And it seems like your connection in your community with your kids was your driving factor. It was your beacon in the night. It was something that you could point your shoes to and say, listen, this is where I got to get back to.
Yeah.
These guys deserve me. These guys need me. And I need them. And so the only way that I can be there for them is to be sober.
Yeah.
Because I know if I'm putting this needle in my arm and I'm going to end up in prison or death. And those were your words.
Yeah.
And that was the only way that story was going to end. And so, you could have been back to rehab, but you'd been there a couple of times. You could have gone back to prison and you'd been there a couple of times.
Yeah.
But along the whole journey, you were given information that you didn't necessarily use, but you also didn't lose.
Yeah.
You had that information. And then you get to a point where you found your rock bottom and you decide that it's something that's got to change.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
So I know what to do.
Yeah.
And then you pointed your shoes in that direction and got it. I applaud you. I admire you. I think you're an outstanding individual, and I think your book's going to help so many.
Thank you. I feel like as addicts, sometimes like we do overcomplicate it. And
that's the understatement, bro.
And like, you know, and even like when you're in that misery, when you're in your active addiction, you want to stop so much. Like you don't want to go forward anymore, but sometimes you feel like the resources ain't out there. So that's my hope, like with this book, is to show like there are other avenues outside of
expensive rehab, prison, whatever it may be, IOPs.
Like, there's a way to do it, and there is a way to go on a self-healing journey while also still not completely shutting out the rest of your life.
Watch this. Dr. Matt, how many ways up Sober Mountain?
Million.
Yeah.
You got to find the one that makes sense to you and the one that's going to get you to the top. But there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And it's not just one size fits all.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's a wrong way. As long as you just don't use, like, you can figure it out, like, as you go. You don't have to overcomplicate it. Like, they say keep it simple, stupid. And that's 100% true. Like, you just got to keep it simple, know where you've been, and know that you're done with that life and you don't ever want to go back there.
I'd like to do a public service announcement right here.
All right.
For any meth users out there.
Just the things you know, or what is it?
There's no reason to take apart the lawnmower. I'm just telling you right now.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
There's no reason to take apart that lawnmower. I don't know why it is, but meth heads always like to take apart lawnmowers.
Yeah, I never did that, but...
You ever put one together?
No.
Okay. Hey, thank you for stopping by and listening to another podcast with Daniel. You can once again find his book, Beehive Fiend, at Barnes & Nobles or just pretty much anywhere you find books. We'll also leave a link right here below it. Thanks for stopping by. Happy Halloween. And in case you forgot, Project Recovery is what?
It's a KSL podcast.
That was a ghost.
Okay. I was hoping it wasn't a stroke.
No, it wasn't.